I believed life was long. I thought there would always be another morning, another dinner, another chance to say the words I never said. But one moment taught me that every breath could be the last, and that lesson changed everything. Subscribe, and tell me from which country you're watching me. Daniel Rivers was 28 years old when he finally felt like life was falling into place. He lived in New York City, worked as a financial analyst for a mid-sized firm, and carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from believing the future stretched endlessly ahead. He wasn't rich, not yet, but he was on his way. His apartment was small but modern, his wardrobe carefully chosen, and his calendar filled with meetings, deadlines, and networking events. When friends teased him about being married to his job, Daniel laughed it off. "I've got time," he'd say. "Life's long. I'll figure everything else out later." And he meant it. To Daniel, later was a promise carved into the fabric of existence. There would always be another weekend to visit his mother in New Jersey, another evening to meet his sister Emily for dinner, another phone call with his father, who often left voicemails saying, "Miss you, son. Call me when you can." Daniel always told himself he would. Just later. On a brisk March morning, Daniel rushed through the subway station, coffee in one hand, phone in the other. His inbox overflowed. His boss had already sent 2 urgent messages, and the day's meetings threatened to spill into the evening. But Daniel felt energized. He thrived on pressure, wore exhaustion like a badge of honor. He ducked into the train just before the doors closed and leaned against the pole, scrolling through notifications. Among the corporate emails was a text from his dad. "Hey champ, haven't heard from you in a while. Want to grab lunch this weekend?" Daniel smiled faintly, his thumb hovering over the keyboard. He almost typed, "Sure, Dad. Saturday works." But then another email notification popped up. Subject line, "Client meeting moved up." He shoved the phone back in his pocket. Lunch could wait. His dad would understand. After all, there would always be another Saturday. That evening, Daniel met with colleagues at a rooftop bar. The city skyline shimmered, drinks clinked, laughter filled the air. His coworker Mia leaned in, her voice raised over the music. "You ever think about slowing down, Daniel? Like, actually enjoying life instead of racing through it?" Daniel grinned. "Enjoying life is exactly what I'm doing. I'm building something. Once I hit my goals, then I'll have time for the rest." Mia shook her head, sipping her cocktail. "You sound just like my brother. He always thought he had more time too." Daniel chuckled, not catching the heaviness in her tone. To him, the idea that time could run out was almost absurd. He was young, healthy, ambitious. Life stretched before him like an endless highway. The following weekend, his father called again. Daniel saw the call flash across his screen as he prepared slides for a presentation. He hesitated, then silenced it. "I'll call him back tomorrow," he told himself. But tomorrow never seemed to come. Emily, his younger sister, texted him too. "We're having dinner at Mom's this Sunday. You should come. It's been ages." Daniel responded quickly, "Wish I could. Swamped with work. Next time. Next time." His 2 favorite words. Life rolled on in this pattern, weeks blending into months. Daniel excelled at work, earned praise from his boss, and secured a promotion. But with every victory, he drifted further from the people who mattered most. Late one Friday night, he sat alone in his apartment, city lights flickering through the window. His fridge was nearly empty, his phone filled with unanswered messages. He scrolled through photos from a family trip years ago. His dad smiling in front of the Statue of Liberty, Emily goofing around with cotton candy, his mom shielding her face from the camera. Daniel sighed, a small pang of guilt tugging at him. He told himself he'd make more time soon. Maybe after this quarter ended. Maybe after the next big project. There was always tomorrow. Then came the day that shattered everything. It was a Tuesday morning, gray skies hanging low over Manhattan. Daniel was preparing for a client pitch when his phone buzzed. The screen displayed Emily's name. He almost ignored it. Meetings waited, but something in his gut made him swipe to answer. "Daniel," Emily's voice trembled. "It's Dad. He collapsed this morning." They rushed him to the hospital. It's, it's bad. The room spun. Daniel grabbed his coat, muttered an excuse to his boss, and bolted for the street. He hailed a cab, his hands shaking as he clutched his phone. What happened? Is he? They don't know yet, Emily whispered. Just come. The ride to the hospital felt endless. Every red light a cruel delay. Daniel's mind replayed every missed call, every postponed lunch, every later he had promised. When he finally arrived, he found his mother and sister in the waiting room, eyes red, faces pale. A doctor approached, his expression solemn. I'm sorry, the doctor said quietly. We did everything we could. The words slammed into Daniel like a physical blow. His knees buckled, and Emily caught his arm. His father was gone. Just like that. No warning. No second chance. The funeral was a blur of black suits, murmured condolences, and memories shared by friends and relatives. People spoke of Daniel's father as a kind man who loved deeply, who always made time for others. Daniel sat in the front row, staring at the casket, his heart heavy with guilt. He hadn't been there. He hadn't answered the calls. He hadn't taken the time. When it was his turn to speak, he stood at the podium, his voice breaking. My dad. He was always there for me, and I kept telling myself I'd make more time for him, someday. But someday never came. I thought life was long. I thought I'd have more chances. I was wrong. Silence filled the room. Tears blurred his vision. He stepped down, feeling the weight of every word. In the weeks that followed, Daniel moved through life like a ghost. Work no longer mattered. The promotions, the deadlines, the late nights, all of it felt meaningless compared to the moments he had missed. He found himself sitting in his father's old chair at his mother's house, running his hands over the worn armrests. He listened to Emily recount stories of their dad fixing her bike, cheering at her art shows, making pancakes on Saturday mornings. Daniel realized how much he had traded away. The laughter, the memories, the simple joy of being present. One night, unable to sleep, he walked through the city streets. Neon lights glared, taxis honked, crowds surged. But Daniel felt detached, as if the world had moved on without him. He paused at a diner he and his father had visited once. He stepped inside, ordered coffee, and sat alone in a booth. Memories flooded back. His dad's booming laugh, the way he teased the waitress, the way he always asked about Daniel's life with genuine curiosity. Daniel whispered to himself, I'm sorry, Dad. The coffee grew cold, untouched. From that night on, something inside Daniel shifted. He couldn't change the past, but he could change the future. He began calling his mom every evening, no matter how busy he was. He showed up for Emily's art exhibitions, standing proudly in the front row. At work, he stopped volunteering for endless overtime. He drew boundaries, choosing dinners with family over late-night reports. His colleagues were surprised, some even critical, but Daniel no longer cared. He carried his father's memory like a compass, guiding him toward what mattered most. The lesson was clear, carved into his soul. Life isn't long. Every moment counts, and every breath could be the last. And yet, as Daniel began to rebuild his life, he had no idea that another test was waiting. A moment that would once again challenge everything he believed and force him to confront the fragile, fleeting nature of time. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Claire looked at him across the table and asked softly, Do you really know what you want, Daniel? Or are you just trying to fix what you regret? Her question cut deeper than he expected, because even as he tried to live differently, part of him wondered the same. Was he truly embracing life, or just running from the shadow of his father's absence? That night, as he lay awake staring at the ceiling, Daniel realized his journey wasn't finished. He had learned the fragility of time, but he hadn't yet learned how to live without fear of losing it. And soon, a choice would come, one that would force him to decide whether to cling to the past or finally step fully into the present. Daniel's life had become a careful balance of presence and fear. He spent more time with his family, cherished every moment with Claire, and tried to live with intention. But deep inside, he carried a constant anxiety. a dread that at any second, something could happen to steal it all away. Every time his mother coughed, his chest tightened. Every time Emily walked home late from her studio, he worried. When Claire once showed up 10 minutes late to dinner, his mind spun through a dozen terrible scenarios before she arrived, smiling and apologetic. Loss had taught Daniel to value time, but it had also carved a deep scar of fear. He was living more than before, but not freely. He was haunted by the fragility of it all. One Saturday morning, Claire found him sitting on the fire escape, staring at the city below, his coffee untouched. "You've been quiet all week," she said, stepping outside with him. Daniel rubbed his forehead. "I keep thinking about Dad, about how one moment he was here, and the next he was gone. I can't shake the thought that it could happen again, to Mom, to Emily, to you, to anyone I love." Claire sat beside him, resting her hand on his. "It could happen again. That's the truth. But living in fear of it doesn't stop it from happening. It just steals the moments you do have." He looked at her, conflicted. "But how do I stop fearing it?" "You don't," Claire said softly. "You accept it. You hold it alongside the joy. That's life, fragile and beautiful at the same time." Her words planted themselves deep in his chest, though he wasn't sure he was ready to believe them yet. A few weeks later, Emily invited him to her art studio. "I want to show you something," she said. When Daniel arrived, he found a large canvas draped with cloth. Emily pulled it away, revealing a painting that nearly took his breath. It was of their father, sitting at the old family dinner table, laughing with light streaming through the window. Around him were images of their mother cooking, Daniel hunched over his books as a kid, Emily painting in the corner. It wasn't just a portrait, it was a memory captured in color. Daniel felt tears sting his eyes. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Emily smiled sadly. "I painted it because I didn't want Dad's presence to fade, and because I wanted to remind you, he's still here, in us, in everything we do." Daniel stared at the painting for a long time, his chest tight but also lighter. It wasn't about holding on to regret anymore. It was about carrying the love forward. That night, Daniel sat at his desk with his journal. He wrote, "Life is not long, but it is wide. Every day stretches out, waiting to be filled. I can't waste it fearing the end. I have to live it, breathe it, embrace it. Not tomorrow, not later, but now." For the first time, the words didn't feel like a burden. They felt like truth. Months passed. Daniel's mother regained her strength, Emily's art career flourished, and his relationship with Claire deepened. There were still moments of fear, flashes of anxiety when the phone rang unexpectedly or when someone was late. But Daniel learned to breathe through it, to remind himself that fear was not proof of love. Presence was. One summer evening, Daniel and Claire walked along the Brooklyn Bridge, the city glowing golden in the fading light. Claire stopped, pulling him to a halt. "Daniel," she said, "I need to ask you something important." He turned to her, surprised by the seriousness in her tone. "Do you want a future with me?" she asked. "Not just as an escape from your regrets, not just as a way to fix the past, but a real future, messy, imperfect, uncertain, but ours." Daniel's heart pounded. For a moment, the fear rose again, the thought of promises, of risks, of how fragile everything was. But then he remembered his father's laugh, his mother's warning, Emily's painting, Claire's steady presence. "Yes," he said, his voice firm. "I want a future with you. Not later. Now." Claire's smile lit up the evening, and she kissed him as the city stretched out around them. Years later, Daniel would look back on that moment as the true turning point. Not his father's death, not his mother's illness, not even the regrets that haunted him, but the choice to stop living in fear of the end, and instead to embrace the fragile, fleeting, beautiful present. He still carried his losses. He always would. But they no longer defined him. They guided him, and whenever he caught himself drifting back into old habits, postponing love, burying himself in work, chasing later instead of now, he would pause, breathe, and whisper the lesson carved into his soul. Every breath could be the last. Don't waste it. Final lesson. Daniel's story is not just about loss. It's about awakening. It's about realizing that life is not measured in years, or promotions, or the promises of later. Life is measured in the moments we choose to live fully, love deeply, and be present without fear. We all believe life is long, until one moment shows us it's not. The question is, what will we do with the time we have? Because later is not guaranteed. Only now is.